My name's Kirk Tusaw. I'm counsel to. Hi, my name's Kirk Tusaw. I'm counsel to Mr. Owen Smith, who's charged today with the offense of possession for the purpose of trafficking THC. It's one of the active ingredients in marijuana, while running a bakery for the Cannabis Buyers Club of Canada. The Cannabis Buyers Club of Canada, operated by Mr. Judd Smith on the right here, no relation to Owen Smith. Serves the needs of some 3,700 critically and chronically ill Canadians who use cannabis for the relief of their symptoms or conditions, some of whom are members of Health Canada's official program, but most of whom have not been able to obtain an actual authorization to possess dried marijuana. Mr. Smith essentially was a baker and operated a bakery for the Cannabis Buyers Clubs of Canada. He's made a range of edible and topical marijuana-based products for the members of the clubs for medical use. And as I say, he's been arrested and charged with trafficking in THC, one of the active ingredients of marijuana. We have sought to challenge those charges on a couple of bases. This is a charter application. We are arguing that the Charter of Rights and Freedoms permits this activity, and that Health Canada's program is unduly restrictive in that it does not allow even authorized persons to produce topicals or edibles or oils or butters for their own personal medical use. We are also arguing that the judge should enter a stay of proceedings. In other words, end the charges against Mr. Smith for a number of reasons. First, because marijuana is a reasonable choice for the patients and members of the CBCoC. Second, because the decisions of the Government of Canada subsequent to a number of charter challenges over the last 10 years have, in my submission, been in contempt of the courts. Courts have said many, many times to the Government of Canada that access to medical marijuana is a right guaranteed by the Charter, and that the Government of Canada ought to expand and open up the restrictions in its current regime. The Government of Canada's response to that has been woefully inadequate, and that's the reason these issues have been litigated in this courtroom and courtrooms across the country for the last 10 plus years. We're hoping as a result of this trial, the federal government of Canada finally comes to its senses, puts into place a sensible, easy to access medical marijuana program so that people can use this safe and effective plant and all of its derivatives without fear of criminal sanction.
Do you see this sort of as a parallel to the case where somebody wanted to grow marijuana for someone else's medical purposes, and that was tested in court too, and they were allowed to do so?
There are many similarities. I like to break the issues related to the Health Canada program into two areas. One is access to the legal protections of the program. In other words, can people that need medical marijuana get the lawful right to do so? And supply. Supply has to do with the production of marijuana for medical purposes, as well as, in this particular case, the production of marijuana-based medicines for the consumption of members of the Cannabis Buyers and Clubs of Canada. And as I say, even an authorized person under Health Canada's regime is unable to produce cannabis butter to make cookies to eat before they go to bed or in the morning to deal with their chronic pain. And they can't do this because your authorization only allows you to possess dried marijuana, and in order to make butter, you actually have to extract from the plant matter the compounds that you actually want to use, the THC, the CBD, the terpenoids, and the other therapeutic ingredients in the plant.
So will one of the arguments be that the current way Health Canada allows people to take medicinal marijuana is actually the least healthy, and in smoking it rather than, say, eating a cookie? Will that health aspect take a part of your argument?
Absolutely. I mean, part of our position is that, number one, it's a basic principle of pharmaceutical science that you deliver medicine to the site of the problem. If you have an infection on your finger, you don't take antibiotic pills as a first resort. You rub antibiotic on your finger, and you only take the systemic application if necessary. Similarly, if you have Crohn's disease or irritable bowel syndrome, there's no particular reason you should be smoking marijuana other than to gain some acute, instant, quick relief. Much better would be to eat it, and that is, of course, also much safer and produces much less side effects. So that's definitely an aspect of our argument. We think it's arbitrary, and we think it's unduly restrictive that persons in this country aren't allowed to make marijuana cookies or marijuana oils or topical salves and those kinds of things for their medical use. And of course the club fills this void by providing that to these individuals.
What do you think what does the Crown have to prove?
Well, it's interesting because it's a constitutional question application. The Crown actually doesn't have to prove much in the way of anything. The burden is on the accused to demonstrate that the current regime fails to meet constitutional standards. If we're able to demonstrate a constitutional violation, then the Crown has the burden of justifying its restrictive scheme on Section 1 of the Charter grounds. That's the reasonably demonstrably justified in a free democratic society test. So we are essentially admitting the elements of possession for the purpose of trafficking. In other words, Mr. Smith is admitting that he possessed these oils and cookies for the purposes of providing them to the club, which then provided them to Canadians with serious medical conditions.
How much of this prosecution is political?
Well, it's hard for me to speculate on that. I mean, in terms of the prosecution itself, I don't know. In terms of the inability or unwillingness of the government of Canada to put in place a working medical marijuana system, I think that's highly political, highly politicized. Clearly, medical marijuana has no allies in the current government in Ottawa. You can just see that this mandatory minimum sentencing regime that's going to be brought in is going to jail a lot of medical marijuana users, growers, and distributors for mandatory prison terms. And the Harper government's well aware of that, so they're not friendly to the issue. Nevertheless, the courts have ruled many, many times that access to marijuana for medical purposes is a right guaranteed by the Charter, and we're confident that the judge will, at the end of the trial, understand why Mr. Smith was doing what he was doing. Well, sentencing would be determined at a later hearing if indeed he's convicted. The maximum penalty is several years in prison. And so, it's going to be up to the judge if he's convicted to impose a sentence that's reasonable in all the circumstances of the offense and the offender.
So you get to make your charter argument first? Is that what happens first here today?
That's correct. Over the next 10 to 20 days, we'll be putting in evidence and then making the charter applications. It's only if we are unsuccessful and Mr. Smith is convicted that we move to a sentencing hearing.
Would we in fact want to have a jury?
Oh, yes. I'd forgotten about one aspect of the trial. Once we get if we get past the legal arguments to Mr. Justice Johnston, who's presiding over the case, Mr. Smith has, as is his right, requested a jury trial, and we would be impaneling a jury and submitting to the jury the issue of medical necessity. It's a common law defense that's within the purview of the jury to acquit Mr. Smith, Mr. Owen Smith, if it believes that he undertook his actions out of a compulsion to provide medical products to those who need it. So we're very confident that a jury will see the facts as we see them.
Mr. Smith, can I ask you,
Yeah.
what thoughts are going through your head this morning?
I'm very excited. I want to see this issue really reach the justice that it deserves. There's a lot of people just waiting for this to happen for a long time. So I'm really excited. Thanks for coming.
Not scared?
No,
Why do you feel you're in the right?
that was really important medicine for a lot of people who I know personally. Sleep, being able to eat, quality of life, and then you have terminal condition. These things are most important just to be able to experience life.
And you've seen these products work.
Yeah. So,
Is there any amount of pride in having your name attached to what could be a precedent-setting case?
I'd be proud if we win. Very much so.
Ted, do you think it's an uphill battle because not all of your members actually have medical marijuana designation? From Health Canada.
I think the fact the majority of our members don't have Health Canada licenses works in our favor with the access arguments that Health Canada's program is overly restrictive. We now have about 3,700 members, which is about a third of the number of people signed up to the entire Health Canada system. And so, our club is really a reflection of what's happening across the rest of the country, where a minority of patients have protection from the government, and the majority of people that are sick that use this medicine don't have the support of their doctor and are doing it illegally and being put at risk to prosecution.
Some would say, though, that in a sense you flouted the law because the police had not really been targeting your club in a while. It was kind of letting things go. But, you know, the alleged offense took place like in an apartment building where other people were complaining about the smell. It's almost like the police can't kind of turn a blind eye to complaints. Do you regret not having it in a more isolated location?
We were doing everything we could to have it in a better location. Again, part of our argument around necessity is the time and place we were stuck in, because we need a facility that, you know, produces cannabis products, and it's going to smell no matter where we are. And we were doing everything we could to minimize the impact on the neighbors. In fact, the complaints of smell from that day were for actually someone making hash oil down the hallway. The smell wasn't even coming from our apartment, but we took the hit for it. And so I don't think that the Victoria Police believe that our work is flaunting the law. We're helping sick people despite a bad law.
Should Canadians be upset at all that we continue to use court resources to kind of piecemeal together an approach around marijuana?
I think Canadians should be very upset at the amount of expenses and time that our justice system is using prosecuting cannabis cases in general. The vast amount of resources being used on a daily basis is something that it's hard to get your head around. And if we are successful in other cases, then we will legalize this plant and it will turn into a benefit to the economy instead of a drain on the economy. That is partly what we hope to do here today. I know a 4-week trial or longer seems like a lot of community resources, but if we do our job well and change the law here, it will be for everyone's benefit, not just because people will live better in this country, but we'll be spending less money on the medical system and prescription drugs, and people will be looking after themselves.
How many people do you think were served by the bakery? That's all of that. How many people do you think were served by that?
Well, we have 3,700 members that have signed up, but that's over a 16-year period. We're actually the oldest dispensary in the world. And so actively, we probably have between 1,000 and 1,300 people that are using our resources every month. And maybe a quarter of them would be depending upon the cookies and sauves and products. So it's several hundred people really when it comes to the numbers. But again, the number of people that would benefit from having this available to them is in the hundreds of thousands and millions even. There's several million Canadians that have trouble eating and sleeping. So we're just a tip of the iceberg.
Can somebody still get a salve or a cookie from the distribution outlet today?
We've never stopped operating. The irony is that while our bakery was raided, the club itself has continued to keep going, and there's been the odd day where we've had trouble keeping up with supply, but that's because of demand more than anything else.
Can I just get your name?
Sure, my name's Kirk Tousaw, Kirktousa.